Let me show you how to create the pattern, transfer the pattern to fabric, and sew this gorgeous dress. One of the highlights on this dress is these beautiful pleated details it has on its bodies. We have cups fixed on the bodies so the wearer doesn't have to worry about bra straps. We also have boning attached to the waistline to help give it a snatched waist effect. Now let's create this together. My name is Kemi Omorugbe. You're welcome to Kemafric. I'll be starting with the basic bodice block. Let me quickly run over it. If you need a detailed tutorial for this, please check out the link in the description box. I started by marking the shoulder width and also the neckline width on my margin. And here I am marking the neckline depth, and I'll go ahead to draw out the neckline curve like so. I'll be drafting the front and the back on the same piece of paper. So on this side I have the front, and I'm creating the shoulder slant of 1.5 inch for the front. Here I am marking the bust point, the under bust points, and also the waistline. Next, I'm going ahead to draw out my horizontal lines. I took the measurement of 8.5 inches from the top of my pattern so I can also draw out the chest line. This is my chest line right there, and after measuring the shoulder width on the chest line, I have the armhole line like so. So at the center of the armhole line, I came inward by 0.75 inches. Now let's move on to the back pattern. I have a neckline depth of 1 inch, a neckline width of 3.5 inches, but the shoulder slant for the back pattern is 1 inch. And here I'm also marking the same 8.5 I took for the position of the chest line. On the chest line, mark the shoulder width again so that you can then draw out the chest line and the armhole line at 90 degrees like so. Now for the back, unlike the front, I came inward on the armhole line by half an inch so I can get the armhole curve drawn out like this. Now I'll be measuring out the back half length of 16 inches. By the way, the front half length I used was 18 inches. Now on the waistline, I am marking the waist circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch for my dart intake. And on the chest line, I'll be marking the bust circumference divided by 4. In my case, I am using 10 1/4. For the front pattern, I will also mark out the bust circumference divided by 4 on the chest line, and on the waistline, I mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus 1.5 inch for my dart intake. That means we'll be creating a dart that is 1.5 inches or inch wide. And now I am drawing a straight line from the waistline to the chest line. I am using a bust span of 8 inches. So for my dart, I am marking 8 inches divided by 2, which is 4 inches on the bust line and on the waistline. And we are going to be squaring this up. Next, I'll be taking my dart intake 0.75 inch on both sides of the dart line. So we have our dart legs connected to the bust line like so. The difference between the front length and back length is 2 inches. So I'm taking a side dart intake of 2 inches. Now, I went ahead to do a couple of things. Unfortunately, my camera wasn't recording. First, I drew out my upper chest line 7 inches from the margin of the paper. Then we have the shoulder dart, which is 0.75 inch wide, to tighten the upper chest line. At the center front, I came upward by 1 inch so that the neckline will be slightly curvy. Then I reshaped the neckline. Remember that the initial dart we have on the basic bodice was 1.5 inch wide. Now I'm going to expand that dart and make it 2 inches wide. So I have 1 inch on both sides on the waistline, and I'm also doing the same thing on the under bust line because we are contouring this pattern. So because of that extra half an inch, I needed to add that to the side of my pattern. You saw me dotting on the side of the waistline. So here I am just creating the pattern for my cup from the 2 inches wide dart to the bust point like so. So I opened up the waist dart so that I can close up the side darts like so. Then we are truing the side of this pattern to make everything blend in properly. Before going ahead to cut out your pattern, take the measurement from the shoulder slant to the top of your new curvy neckline so that you know the length of the strap you'll be needing for this. And also I'll be reshaping the new neckline for my bustier like so, just to make it blend in properly. I don't want any sharp points at the armhole. So this is what I have at the end of the day. I went ahead to cut out the rest of this front pattern. Don't forget that the side dart should be closed, so go ahead and tape it down like I did mine. Now I'm going to do a little adjustment on this pattern. So because of that, I extended the paper like so, bringing the two sides of my dart leg just the way I placed it. I brought them together. First, I'm going to reshape the underbust line. So at the side of the underbust line, I came downward by 1 inch, and we're going to be making it curvy rather than a straight line because we want to cut out a part of this pattern. You're going to understand as we go on. Meanwhile, at the center front, I took 2 inches below the waistline to create another curve. So from that point, I created a curve for my waistline rather than the naturally straight waistline we have. So here I'm extending the dart line downward, and we are going to cut out this part of the pattern. By the way, you don't need to split the darts open for the extension. I mean, between the underbust line and the waistline, I went ahead to retape mine because the cut wasn't necessary. But don't forget to label your pattern and show that this is facing upward. I don't know if you get me, so that you don't mistakenly tilt it the other way. Now let's move on to the back pattern. On the back pattern, I extended my chest line like so, and here I am marking out the dart width of 1 inch. At the center back, I came inward by 0.75 inches. So I'm going to mark that extra at the side of the waistline. So from that point, we are creating a slanted zipper allowance right there, and just contouring this pattern so that it fits and sits perfectly into the center back. So at the center back as well, I came downward by 1 inch from the chest line to make the back neckline slightly curvy like so. I also tightened the top of that chest line by 0.5 inch, 0.25 on both sides of my dart leg like so. So here I'm just labeling my patterns, and also I connected the back neckline to the shoulder so that I can measure the length of the strap. Write this somewhere so that you don't forget, because you're going to need it eventually. The skirt part of this dress is a gathered 180-degree flare. So what I did was to multiply the waist circumference by 3. I divided what I got by 3.14 to give me the radius, and now I am marking the radius. I'm supposed to mark 31 point something inches, but I decided to just make it 30 inches because the length I will have after that will just be 30 inches. Remember, I folded 60 inches length and 60 inches width. So I marked 30 inches for my radius, and I went ahead to mark the other 30 inches for the length of the skirt from the waistline curve that I got from my radius. Okay, so just follow me. This pattern marking represents the hem of the skirt, right? So I went ahead to cut out that curve, that radius, that line I got that curve I got from my radius. So we have our waistline like so, and here I am cutting out the hem of the skirt. In transferring my pattern to fabric, I have a 1 inch wide allowance at the sides and 0.5 inch in between the panels. Okay, when you're cutting the front, don't forget to notch the bust line because this will help when you are sewing. So here are my patterns for the front. I have these two, which I'll be sewing together by 1/2 inch. Before I go ahead to sew, here I'm just showing you that I have sewn in my fusible interfacing, and I am using the same fabric as the lining, but you can make use of a crepe lining. It will work very well, or even a light duchess. It will also work very well. So I'll be joining the center panel to the sides by 1/2 inch. After doing that, I went ahead to notch along the bust line just to make my cuff sitting properly. Then I pressed my seams open. So this is what I have at the end of the day. Remember that one is the lining, the other one is the fashion fabric. So I'll be attaching this cup to the lining. Because I marked out the bust point, I'll be attaching the deepest part of this cup to that bust point and just stretching out my fabric so that it sits in properly. And I'm still doing it here. I'm just repositioning my cups properly to ensure that it's, balances on both sides. So next I went ahead to pin, and I'll be sewing along the bust line. I'll be sewing the cup to the fabric along the dart line rather, and also tacking the sides. I didn't use hand needle here. In the tacking process, I still use my sewing machine to just tack the sides onto the lining like so. So I discovered that there's a little bit of an overlap at the center front. So I just cut out the cup and went ahead to use my sewing machine to tack the cup onto the center front like so. Then also I did the same thing at the side of the cup. Now let's create the strap for the dress. The fabric I have here was cotton bias, and it is 2 inches wide. The length I used, remember we took measurements on the pattern, right? So I added that of the front to that of the back to get the entire length. I'll be making use of boning here to turn my strap. So what I did was to fold the piece of fabric and stitch boning onto it. Then at the top, then I'll go ahead to insert this boning and sew the side. I won't be sewing the boning onto the fabric. The boning is just to help me pull out the fabric when I'm done sewing. So here I'm just sewing by 1/2 inch, making sure that I'm not sewing the boning inside. And when you're done with that, go ahead to cut out any excess, because that will make turning it more difficult. There's actually a tool for this, but I don't have it available here. That's why I'm making use of my boning. Trust me, the first part of this pulling process is the most challenging one, and once you are able to get that done, it gets easier from there. So I'm just trying to manipulate my fabric just to get that first pull at the top of the boning. Then I'll go ahead to continue pulling out the boning. It just comes off easily from this point. I forgot to mention that I pressed on fusible interfacing even on the strap as well. It is cut on bias just so it lays flat. So here I'm cutting out my boning. In the process, you cut a piece, just a tiny piece of the fabric, and I'm stitching close that point because this fabric creeps very easily. By the way, did I mention that I'm making use of Mikado silk? Yes, that's the fabric I'm using. So having done that, when you're stitching that top, make sure that your seam is at the center of the back, okay? So that way you don't have any seam at the side of the strap. The only seam you have is at the back. So after turning that seam to the back, you go ahead and press it properly, and you get these beautiful straps that I have here. Now I'll be attaching this strap to my bodies, to the fashion fabric. You need to make use of your pin. So go ahead to pin down the strap, the right side facing the right side of your fabric. Do the same thing on both sides. Then cover it up with the lining. What you're doing is sandwiching the strap in between the fashion fabric and the lining. Having done that, go ahead to sew close the neckline. While sewing these two together, I sew in a layer of hemming glue. So this is to help me stick that top together and make it sit into each other properly, because I won't be top stitching on the lining. So having done that, I pulled out my pins, turned this inside out, and went ahead to give that neckline a good press. This is what I have after pressing. Beautiful, right? Now let's move on to the back piece. Just like we did for the front, I'll be starting the back by sewing the panels together, the side panel to the center back panel, and I'm joining these two together by 1/2 inch. I also have the fashion fabric and the lining interfaced already, and I went ahead to press open my seams like so. Now I'll be attaching my strap to the back as well. In the process of sewing the front piece, I realized it was too high along the neckline than I wanted, so I trimmed off 1 inch from the neckline for the front. So I added that 1 inch to the length of my strap. And here I'm just measuring the length of the strap so that I'll know exactly where I'll be attaching to the back. Now, right side facing each other, I'm going to use a pin to hold the strap onto the fashion fabric for the front, then sandwich it using the lining. Just like I did for the front, while sewing this, I'll be sewing along my hemming glue. Now let's talk about the pleated detail that we'll be attaching to the front of this dress. I took the measurement from the underbust to the neckline like so, and I added 2 inches. Looking back now, I think just taking the measurements and using that measurement for the height of that detail is enough. You don't need to make it 2 inches longer, okay? So I also went ahead to measure the width of this underbust line. I'll be multiplying what I get by 2.5 to get the width of the fabric I will be pleating on the underbust. Now you can also multiply whatever you get by 3, it will still work fine. Note that the piece of fabric I'm holding is actually unfold at the top. I took the measurement of the side of my dress, that is the distance between the armhole and the underbust line, and that's what I used to also cut the side of this piece of fabric. While this center is the height of the center of the dress plus 2 inches. Like I said, you can actually just make use of that height. So it is unfold at the top because I didn't want to start joining any fabric to any fabric. So what I did was to notch the center of the front piece along the underbust line, and then I also notched the center of my fabric that I'll be using to create my pleats right there. So I'll be attaching this to the fashion fabric, not to the lining, just to the fashion fabric. It is unfold, and I made use of the part of Mikado that is firm, so I didn't use any fusible interfacing because there's a part of Mikado, when you touch your fabric, you notice that one part has better structure, a stronger structure than another part. I think it is along the selvage, I'm not sure right now, but just go and fold your fabric along the breadth and along the length. I think it is firmer along the length, so I went ahead to create my pleat on the fashion fabric. Now this is a centerpiece. I don't know what to call it, but it extends from the underbust line to altered waistline. So I went ahead to infuse this with fusible interfacing, and also we have this straight bonings on the lining part. Okay, this should be invisible from the front, so you don't want to do this on the main fabric except if it's part of your own design detail. So I went ahead to sew this onto the upper part of the bodice. Now I'm going to be sewing the front and the back piece together along the side. I'll be sewing the lining of the front to the lining of the back, then the fashion fabric for the front to the fashion fabric for the back. This is what we have so far. It is time to now sew the skirt part onto the bodies. But let me show you guys something. You see these 2 pieces I'm holding right here? I don't want it shaking around. Because of that, for the front, I'm attaching my pleat to both the fashion fabric and the lining at the same time. But for the back, I am separating the lining from the fashion fabric, okay? Now we're going to do it together, so don't get confused yet, okay? So this is the skirt I'm working with. The way I create my pleats, I go ahead to fold this into 2 and I notch the center, then I fold it again and notch the center of this new fold. So what it means is that I'm dividing this fabric into 4. Now you can make use of your hand needle and pleat the way you know how to pleat, or you make use of a pleating foot, but I just like using this method. So as I have divided it into 4, remember what I told you guys, that for the front I'm attaching both the lining and the fashion fabric together at the same time. So I just pinned it together so that I know that I'm working together. Okay, please just watch me closely. So this is the fashion fabric for the back without the lining. I'm creating the pleat on only the fashion fabric for the back. Okay, so I took my my fashion fabric, the skirt, and I'm pleating it on only the fashion fabric. No lining yet. The lining is not part of this. So when I'm through with that first quadrant, for the second quadrant, since we are now working on the front, I didn't separate the lining from the fashion fabric for my body. So okay, I'm talking about the bodies. So now I'm pleating the skirt. I'm pleating the skirt for the front on both the fashion fabric and the lining together. Okay, what I'm showing you here is that the lining for the back is still free, but for the front I'm putting both the lining and also the fashion fabric together and pleating my skirt on it. For the third quadrant, remember that that side is also going to the front, right? The other side of the front. I also did the same thing. I worked with both the lining and the fashion fabric. Now I am on the other side of the back and we are working on only the fabric, no lining. So I'm creating my pleat on only the fabric for the back. So I'll show you what we have now on the table, maybe to help you understand better. But if you have any question, don't hesitate to drop it in the comment section. Now this is what we have right here. I haven't sewn the lining for the skirt, okay? So you can see that the back piece is free. It is completely free. The lining is not attached to the bodice, but we can't say the same thing for the front. So here's my lining. Just like I did for the main fabric, I'm going to be doing the same thing on the lining. I am sewing the skirt lining onto the lining for the bodice, but for the front there will be no separation. Okay, I'm sewing it on the other side to close up my seam. Okay, now this is what we have for the front, and at the back we have this with all our seams enclosed and the back not connected to the lining. Okay, so what this will allow us to do is that I can now close up my zipper allowance without issue. That's the only reason I use this method. Now I'm going to be sewing my zipper onto the center back of the fashion fabric alone, and when I'm through, I will use the lining to cover up the seam. Okay, I'm just going to turn the lining around and use it to cover up the seam. I want to assume that you know how to fix a zipper. If not, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube that you can watch. After sewing in my zipper and closing up the seam, I went ahead to finish up the hemline of the dress, and also I overlocked the hemline of the lining, but there's nothing against folding. Let me show you a short tutorial on this that I uploaded on TikTok. Let me show you a very neat and quick method you can use in finishing curvy hemlines. You can use it on curvy hemlines of shirts and also circular skirts or any other circular hem that you want to work on. First, you need to ensure that you add a 0.75 to 1 inch wide hemming allowance. Out of this width of allowance, go ahead and fold in half an inch while you are sewing by a quarter of an inch. Go ahead and trim out any excess you may have. I don't have much excess here. Then give the hemline a good press. Once that is done, you're going to fold the hem along the seam you sewed just now. You can go ahead to press after folding, but now you're going to be sewing about quarter of an inch on the new fold. Once you have followed the steps so far, your new seam will sit in properly into your curvy hemline. This is what I have at the end. You can go ahead and press, please. This is very, very important. You can see how neat it looks. Let me know if you find this helpful. Follow and like for more videos like this. There we have it, guys. Our dress is almost ready. The last step here is to just stretch out the design detail at the front and hold it down with pins. Then go ahead to tack it in a way that is not too obvious from the front. And then you have your dress looking and sitting pretty. We have come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up, please do that. Drop a comment in the comment section and share this to other designers. See you in my next video. Bye.